Hello, everyone, and welcome to Feed Your Mind. I am excited today with our guest, Michelle Dickinson, who's a resilience coach, but more than that, mental health, mental illness strategist. And I am so excited to have Michelle on today. Michelle, I can't wait to get to hear all about you. And let me just start off by saying, as I've read a little bit about your bio, mental illness is deeply personal to you. And maybe we can start with that. When did you start to really focus on mental illness?
So first off, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here, and thank you for your invitation to talk about this. I think it's so important when we start to really talk about mental health. We can almost make our own little imprint on the stigma and create change. So thank you again for having me. So I was honestly, for me, I was just minding my own business, working a corporate job for many years, and found myself invited to give a TED talk about my childhood. And my childhood was growing up with a mother who had bipolar disorder, and I cared for her for a large portion of my life. So um, I gave the TED talk about that experience, and the power that it has to go first was really what stuck with me. When you start to open up and talk about these mental mental health and mental illness related topics, people almost are given permission to talk about their own experiences, whether it's their own or their loved ones that they supported. Um, that really connected me to do more with this work. So I went on and wrote a memoir, breaking into my life, telling the full story about what life was like loving and caring for my bipolar mom. And then eventually I left my corporate job and started my own private practice to teach people of what they can do to boost their own emotional well-being and preserve mental health. So they don't have to wait until they hit burnout. They don't have to wait until they start to feel low. They can actually be doing things every single day to feel good. So
Well, you had a goal to touch 10,000 lives in 2022. Did you meet that goal?
I think I did. If I went back and looked at all the podcasts, all the public speaking, all the clients, group trainings I have done, the one-on-one training I've done, I think it's pretty close to that, but I'm gonna up the ante for 2023.
Awesome, awesome. We'll help you. We still got a few more days left in 2022, so we're going to help you
Yeah.
touch even more lives. I know our viewers and listeners and myself personally have all been touched in some way with a mental illness, and it caused you to write a book, a memoir, which is pretty interesting. Breaking into my life, I actually ordered a copy, and we'll post up the links throughout the show. But one of the things that drives me crazy is the stigma that comes along with mental illness. I'm a retired police officer, and I would venture to say that 95% of all officers suffer from some sort or some level of at least PTSD. But the stigma attached to that really creates a problem, and officers are not going to seek help for
Right.
many reasons. But aside from police officers or first responders, normal people, there's a
Yeah.
stigma. Why is there still a stigma attached to mental illness?
Anything related to any type of stigma, I believe in my heart that it's just lack of information, lack of knowledge. It's easy to stigmatize something um, instead of get curious as to what is it really all about. So I think the reason we still have a stigma is that we still have people who are not curious to understand it, and they're passive in their understanding. They'll allow like media outlets and other, things, publicly shared to define their understanding instead of becoming curious themselves. Like, what is it? What is depression? What is bipolar disorder? We throw terms around, in our language and how we speak, oh, he was bipolar. And it's like until you really understand what that means, you will not stop using it inappropriately. So I think there's an opportunity for us to challenge our own knowledge about mental health and mental illness and educate ourselves. There's so many remarkable resources out there to do that. And when we do that, we slowly start to normalize the conversation. When we normalize the conversation, we diminish the stigma. So I think we all have a role in going first and talking about it first and foremost. Doesn't have to be about ourselves. It could be about a celebrity or an athlete who came out and spoke about it. And then to also be responsible with our language and be curious and learn more about it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the professional athletes because I know in the last couple of years, I'm a huge football fan, and a lot of the professional football players came out, and the NFL actually, put a lot of time into this informational commercials or PSAs with athletes that we all look up to as being superhuman,
Yeah.
and they were able to share their stories and explain that it's okay not to be okay.
Yeah.
And my son battled with some depression. He's an athlete. He's a performance coach up there in Oregon, and uh, a year, maybe 2 years ago, he started having these feelings of depression that he could not explain. And those NFL PSAs really helped him out and got him to go seek help. And I just left them, and he's doing so well now. But that stigma, that apprehension to seek help.
Yeah.
The other problem is, everyone looks at Hawaii as being paradise, as the tropical paradise, and everyone
Yeah.
wants to come here because it's just wonderful. But we suffer from a huge problem of mental illness, and the resources are lacking. Is that the same pretty much all over the country?
Yeah, I think you have to look for your local resources. I think, the average person doesn't know where to look, right? So you would start with your general practitioner most of the time and then go right to a therapist. Well, there are other resources available, um, websites, organizations that you can learn from. If you're just curious, what are the signs and symptoms of depression? I'm concerned about a loved one. Well, you can go to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI.org, and learn about that, what they have to say about different types of illnesses, what to look for, support groups in various communities that you can tap into. Mental Health America is another great resource. I think that, when it comes to education, we have a lot of wonderful resources. When it comes to clinical care, especially because of COVID, it's challenging. So I always recommend people lean into telemedicine. It's access that you need. You don't need to be told you got to wait like 6 months to see a doctor because they're so busy. If you get, into a video chat with a clinician, that's probably going to be the best bet that you can have. So telemedicine exists. There's so many different options, from Talkspace to um, oh, there's so many, I can't even list them off, but there are a bunch of, telemed resources that I always recommend people tap into.
Great advice. Yeah, I mean, we all looked into that, and there's a lot of credible sources out there on the internet, a lot of opportunities for folks to tune in and
Mhm.
get in touch with a clinician virtually. Awesome. Uh,
The other thing I just wanna add real quick, so many men suffer from mental illness, and women don't know how to support their men. How they can, tap into just getting comfortable with the conversation with them is through a really great website called mantherapy.org. That's just a great resource. It brings humor and levity to stress. I think it reaches men effectively, but it also provides resources for women. And how can I reach and talk to my, the person I care about if I sense they're struggling?
your advocacy for bringing awareness to mental health, as I've learned in the last couple of weeks, um, is amazing. You mentioned the trifecta of mental health. What
Mhm.
is the trifecta of mental health?
Well, thanks for asking that question. I appreciate that. So, I I never in a million years thought I would leave a corporate job. I thought I would retire from a corporate job and, visit beautiful places like Hawaii in my retirement. Never in a million years did I think I'd be doing this work. But, life has a way of taking turns. And so the trifecta of mental health is the three layers of experience that I bring to my practice. The first is growing up loving and caring for a bipolar parent. So I know firsthand what it's like to be a caregiver to someone with a mental illness. The second of the trifecta is I know what it's like to shift a culture. So, working in my corporate job, I help shift the culture, remove stigma, create a normal narrative around mental health. So, I know what it takes to shift company culture. And then the third of the trifecta is I suffered from depression because of a life event that I was navigating, a divorce. So, I know what it feels like. I know how heavy the blanket can feel like when you're dealing with and navigating depression. So I bring those three lenses to mental health in my practice as I help people, whether it's in my resilience coaching or my workshops. I really get it, and I want people to know that.
You created 5 steps of cultivating a culture. Culture is an interesting term. Here in Hawaii, we have a culture, a Hawaiian culture, but there's also cultures at work. There's cultures amongst your friends. There's different types of cultures, but you created this 5 steps of cultivating a culture of compassion. What are those 5 steps?
It's there are so many. I mean, I can touch on the five. There are more since the five, but I'll just give you the baseline. So, but what is it that companies can do to create a stigma-free environment? There are quite a few things they can do that they don't even realize. The first is having a clear commitment of inclusion for people with mental illnesses, invisible disabilities, if you will. Having that as a commitment at the highest level of the organization and then backed by organizational policy. So I'm talking more to a corporate environment now. Um, Access. Number two would be access to mental health care. If you want to create more compassion in your workplace, you have to make sure there's no barriers for your employees if they go to ask for care. The last thing you want is for an employee to finally have that courage to pick up the phone and call for help and be told that they have to wait 3 to 6 months to see a doctor. You want to make sure that you're removing those barriers. Education and training of people leaders. I can't stress this enough. Yes, I do offer this in my practice, but I was the recipient of a leader in my former company who did not demonstrate compassion and understanding when I disclosed that I was dealing with depression. So we really need to recognize that our leaders are leading in a post pandemic world. And with so many people struggling from some type of a mental health imbalance coming out of this pandemic, you have to realize that leadership takes on an entirely different meaning. And we need to equip and empower those leaders to be able to meet and support their people with whatever they're dealing with. Um, and then, having a structured employee peer community or support group, like an employee resource group or a peer community, there's nothing more powerful than having a group of folks who feel safe coming together and sharing that they've navigated some hard stuff and come out the other side. Because seeing that in a colleague that they've made it out the other side, they've navigated some stuff can really provide hope for other employees. And then maybe even a sharing platform in an organization, that's sort of high goal down the road that doesn't happen overnight, but like a sharing platform where you can have panel discussions, you can bring in your EAP, you can bring in, leaders, who want to endorse and support what they're up to in the organization. But I think one of the most powerful things organizations can do is have a senior level leader go first because that sets the tone. So if you have a leader who has navigated severe anxiety or who has dealt with depression or who cares for someone at home who's struggling, in sharing that story, you subliminally give your staff permission to speak about it, to acknowledge it, and to get support if they need it, and have them not feel alone.
Yeah, I agree, and, I know here in the county where I work, the county of Kauai here, they have an amazing EAP program, but I think what you just suggested, that the leader or some top level person using the program, using the services, and then sharing about it would really make it easier for others to use the service. And
Yeah.
you mentioned earlier your memoir,
Right.
Breaking into Life. Uh, I was somewhat of a caregiver for my mom when she had cancer, but she was, she was very functional.
Yeah.
Um, and you were a caregiver for a mom that was bipolar, as you said earlier. Why did you write this book, and what can we expect when we read this book?
I think, it goes back to the experience I had just in that 10-minute TED talk telling the story of my mom and really seeing the power that telling your story can have for someone else who maybe experienced that, but nobody had ever put words to their experience. Um, I think that's really what compelled me. I thought to myself, if I could do this in 10 minutes in a TED talk, what could I do if I wrote a book? So I really wanted to tell that story of what life was like loving my mom because there's so many emotions that go along with being a caregiver. And my mom was not always nice. She was abusive emotionally, mentally, physically. And that I've come to realize is because the hurt others. Um, but I've reached that point of healing and realization. Um, so I really wanted people to understand that even though we've endured and had experiences in our life, whatever that looks like, the pen is in our hands and we get to create the future. So my story is a story of perseverance and hope. And I'm out to normalize our relationship to mental health with the story itself. But more than anything, leave people hopeful and optimistic that, if I can navigate this, it's possible for you to have navigated whatever you have and come out and create a future that you want.
Yeah, well, bless you for doing that for mom. I know it's not easy. It's uh, especially with mental illness, and uh, people got to understand. I think it goes back to what you said earlier about the stigma
Yeah.
uh, whatever it is, whether it's mental illness or whatever it may be. It's the lack of understanding what
Yeah.
the condition is, and it just creates so many issues. So, what do you say to people when who may be suffering from mental illness, or maybe taking care of someone with mental illness? What do you tell them? And there's always the possibility that someone may get offended. Uh,
Yeah.
I know in my life I've often told friends and even family members, "Hey, go get some help," and they get offended.
Yeah.
What do you? How do you tell them or share with them that there are resources available?
I think, we underestimate the power of listening. I think, a lot of us come at these types of conversations with the need and the desire to want to fix things. And instead, our greatest contribution might be to just listen and hold space for them, um, and allow them to come to the conclusion that maybe they deserve more. Maybe they deserve support. So my first recommendation is to not be so quick to push them in a direction, but to support them and help them arrive at their own conclusion that they deserve more. Um, as for caregivers, I have a message for caregivers because it's so easy to get lost in caring for our loved ones and not take care of ourselves. So my message for caregivers is if you want to show up and be the best that you can be for the person that you love in your life, you have got to fill your cup. You have got to make the time to care for yourself so that you're not depleted because you being depleted is not going to serve them in any way. So for caregivers, you've got to take care of yourself.
I remember when my mom was getting very ill, and hospice was a huge part of helping us, our whole family, and that was the number one thing that they pushed us. You guys need to take care of yourselves. You need your time. And it's weird. I've since then, I've seen commercials on TV or ads in the paper about these services that actually come to you to give you that period of time that you need away. I think for me, it was the guilt that I don't want to leave mom alone.
Yeah.
I don't,
Yeah.
but it's okay
Yeah.
because, like you said, you got to fill the cup.
You do. You do. You do. And then you don't give your mom the best version of you if you just keep going and keep going. You want to give yourself, you want to give the best version of you to that loved one. The only way you do that is if you nourish yourself and you take care of yourself and you balance yourself and you can be strong for them and not completely depleted. Um, so don't do that to yourself or to your loved one.
Yeah. As it relates to mental illness, though, there's this. Some people have a fear,
Yeah.
unlike cancer. Taking care of someone with cancer. You're running around getting them what they need, but there's no fear in that. But when you're dealing or taking care of someone with mental illness, or if you're having a discussion with someone about mental illness, in many cases, there's fear attached.
Yeah.
And how do we get around the fear component when we're dealing with mental health issues?
Just educate yourself. I go back to what I say, educate yourself. Don't allow the media or stories or gossip to dictate your understanding of an illness. Educate yourself. Know what it is, know what it isn't. And you'll diminish the fear. Mental illness, it's the uncertainty. People want to dwell on the uncertainty and the horrific things we see in the news. It's not all that way. So, go to those websites like NAMI, Mental Health America, educate yourself. If your loved one has, you know, um, severe depression, understand what that looks like, understand what that feels like for them, understand what types of challenges they're going to deal with, how you can support them. Um, but with education, we reduce and diminish the fear.
And like you said, the media doesn't help, right? It's bizarre how the media will, and you talk about this as well, how the media will, regardless of whatever the bad act is,
Yeah.
or it might be a crime, or it may have been a car accident, whatever it may be,
Yeah.
they just cannot wait to tell the public that the person was suffering from mental illness. And like you said, it's a change of the culture. I mean, I'm guilty as you were talking about the language we use. I was just in Oregon and I told my son, geez, son, this weather here is so bipolar. And I didn't think anything of it until a few minutes ago when you mentioned the language that we use. That is not appropriate now as I think back.
Yeah.
It is absolutely not appropriate. So that little nugget is going to stick with me for the
Mhm.
rest of my life. And but we got a media that thrives on stigmatizing mental illness. And
Yeah.
I see that all across the country, in newscasts or in media, whether it's print or TV. How do we get them to stop?
They don't. You got to turn it off. Turn it off. I see this all the time. It's like, one of the things I do when I meet with my clients one on one resilience coaching is we do an audit. And one of the questions in the resilience audit is how much media do you consume? Even if it's on in the background and you think you're not really hearing it, you are. Your subconscious mind is absorbing all of the information they're pushing out. And the whole goal of media is for you to continue watching. So if you get it that they are just wanting you to stay engaged, they're going to sensationalize everything. So you have to take back the control, protect your headspace by turning off the sources that can generate that angst and that fear and that, the untruths that come spewing out of it.
It's the media is it's difficult to explain to my kids how the media was when I grew up. It was actually news. It was newsworthy information that we would get. It wasn't slanted like it is now. And I don't care what channel
Yeah.
you watch. It's
Yeah.
just it's horrific. Um, I my experience with mental illness or mental health issues. I was very young in the police force. Volunteered to go and uh, be a security guard or yeah, security guard, I guess, not that they needed it, for a Special Olympics dance, and, I was afraid. I went because it was an opportunity to wear my uniform, and I was so young in the department, I was so proud to wear that whenever I could, and I got there, and I was genuinely afraid to get close to some of these athletes, because they looked different, they spoke different, they acted differently, and we're talking about severe mental illness, in many cases. But something happened that night, and I started to see the joy. These kids were like the happiest kids I've ever met, and they had challenges. They didn't know they had challenges, you
Yeah.
know? I learned long ago that it was not handicapped, it was handy capable. But subsequent to that, I became a coach, for 10 years for Special Olympics, so I got to really understand the challenges, but also the positives. And I wish more people would get that experience, and I'm hoping that through books like yours and other resources available that people have a better understanding on of mental illness, and more importantly, if you feel like you're suffering from depression or any other type of mental illness, that you seek help.
Yeah.
Like you said, they're readily available.
Yeah, we have to do that. We have to normalize the conversation. It's not, you look at what has happened. This pandemic, before the pandemic, they said 1 in 5 would experience a mental health challenge in their lifetime. And coming out of the pandemic, it's now 1 in 3 are either suffering from depression or anxiety. So if it's that prevalent, why are we not talking about it more? And why are we not normalizing it? And why are we not promoting care? So I think we all have a role to play. If it's that significant and that prevalent, we all have a role to play in just talking about it and normalizing it so people don't have a hesitation to reach out and get support.
Yeah, exactly. And there was a lot of COVID money flowing down the pipeline to all different jurisdictions, and I wish more money would be focused on providing that care, providing that opportunities for care. It's very hard to get someone to go get help if they're not ready and willing. But the more we promote that it's okay not to be okay
Mhm.
mentality, then I think more people will get help.
And I think too, if we take a step back, people don't want to be told that there's something wrong with them.
Mhm.
So if we take us like the way I approach it when I talk to people, it's like assess your level of joy. And if your level of joy isn't where you know it can be, then there might be an opportunity for you to look at why you're not so joyful. Pretty basic, right?
That's a yes, a pretty easy concept. A simple
Pretty
concept.
easy. Like let's look at it from a joy perspective. You don't have joy and you know what is possible for you, then is an opportunity to fix that.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to go to one of your workshops. Definitely gonna have to go to one of your workshops. Yeah, I used to like when my son was suffering. I told him, son, your brain is an organ, your heart is an organ, your liver, your kidneys, all of these organs get checked on by the doctors whenever you go to the doctor. They take a blood test, and they check to see if all your organs are working. I used to tell this to the cops all the time. You need to check your brain as an organ. We need to make sure that's functioning and at its peak, and then you'll have a better, happier life. And hopefully we can get to that point where that becomes a norm, and people will
Yeah,
be checking out their mental health, uh, as importantly as they check out their physical health.
I agree.
Michelle, it's been I could talk to you all day long. I could. I did want to give you an opportunity to share your website. I will have all of the links in the description and in the show notes. But what's the best way if someone wants to learn more about what you do or get
Yeah.
a copy of your book? What's the best way to for people to reach out?
Well, first of all, let me share with you if you go onto TikTok, if you go to Resilience Coach Michelle, you're going to get tons of little quick resilience tips. So I want your audience to know go and get all of the free resilience tips that I have on my TikTok. So that's Resilience Coach Michelle. If you want my book, you can go to Amazon.com and find it. It's called Breaking Into My Life. If you would like to connect with me, you can absolutely connect with me. The best place for that would be on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is literally my second home. I'm there all the time. So it's Michelle E. Dickinson on LinkedIn. And yeah, reach out. I love to connect with people, love to hear how they found me and anything I can do to support. I'm there.
TikTok. I didn't think you'd be on TikTok, but
Absolutely.
I just started a TikTok channel and
Okay.
still trying to learn how to use it. But I will definitely hit you up on all of those
Please do.
platforms. How I am, and for our audience, I encourage you all to do the same. This has been an amazing discussion in just a very short period of time. I have learned, obviously, as I have shared, and I definitely look forward to hopefully having more discussions with you going forward. But I did want to give you an opportunity to share whatever you want with our listeners and our viewers, um, because this is such an important issue.
Mhm. Absolutely. And so never assume that people around you are okay. Especially this time of year, people are going through their own experience. So check in on the ones that you love, check in on the ones that appear on social media to be okay. And don't assume because you just checking on them can make all the difference in the world.
Michelle Dickinson, I thank you. I wish you all the best in 2023. I'm curious to hear what your new lofty goal is for 2023. We will definitely help you get there.
Thank you.
You're in New Jersey, right?
I am. I'm in chilly New Jersey right now.
Yeah, well, stay
Thank you.
warm, and
Thank
stay
you.
healthy. And again, we wish you all the best. You
Thank
take
you.
care of yourself. And to our viewers, we shall see you folks soon. Aloha, everybody.